uncover the shocking crimes hiding in plain sight. Today, we bring you a case from the prestigious community of far north Dallas, Texas. In early June of 2019, behind one grand door, a brutal and tragic crime would leave the community shaken. Jessica Collins Moore was 39 years old, a successful interior designer living in far north Dallas, Texas. Known for her creative style and bold ideas, Jessica had built a name for herself among some of the wealthiest families in Dallas. Jessica lived in a sprawling, custom-designed home in a gated community, reflecting her taste for high-end decor. Her talent for transforming spaces made her popular with clients, and she quickly built a reputation for her sophisticated, modern style. But despite her professional success, Jessica's personal life was less glamorous. She was married to Dennis Collins, a 52-year-old dentist. Dennis was much older than Jessica and had recently been diagnosed with prostate cancer just weeks after their wedding, which had put a strain on their relationship, especially the sexual aspect of it. Their marriage, once passionate, had become distant, cold, and loveless. The couple had no children together, but Dennis had a son from his previous marriage, Tanner Collins, who had recently moved back home after struggling in college with alcohol and ADHD. Friends described Jessica as outgoing, magnetic, and always the life of the party. She hosted regular get-togethers for friends and clients, often serving gourmet meals from trendy Dallas restaurants. Beneath the surface, however, Jessica was deeply dissatisfied. She felt trapped in her loveless and sexless marriage, especially after Dennis's cancer diagnosis. As a result, she sought excitement and escape in risky sexual relationships with both men and women. In the months leading up to her death, Jessica had taken an even riskier move and begun a secret sexual affair with her 20-year-old stepson Tanner. Jessica's dreams of expanding her interior design business and possibly moving to Los Angeles were still on her mind in the days before her death. Her life was a complicated mix of success and struggle, with her risky choices eventually leading to tragedy. On June 3, 2019, it was a hot, humid morning in far north Dallas, Texas. The clock had just passed 9 a.m. when Dennis Collins arrived home from his usual early appointment at his dental office. He walked into the quiet house, expecting to find his wife, Jessica, preparing for the day. Instead, he was greeted by an eerie silence. Dennis headed upstairs to their bedroom, calling out Jessica's name, but there was no answer. When he opened the bedroom door, the scene he found would haunt him forever. Jessica's body was lying on the floor, naked with visible bruises and marks all around her body. A heavy leather belt, one Dennis immediately recognized as his own, was lying nearby. The room was in complete disarray, with pillows and blankets thrown across the bed, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place. It was clear that Jessica had been brutally attacked. Dennis was frozen with shock for a moment, unsure of what to do. His wife, the woman he had shared his life with for the past 3 years, was dead. He quickly called 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what he had just seen. The dispatcher instructed him to remain calm and not touch anything in the room until the police arrived. Within minutes, emergency responders were on the scene. The first officer to arrive later described Dennis as pale and trembling, struggling to hold back tears. He kept repeating, "I don't understand. How could this happen?" Paramedics quickly confirmed what Dennis already knew. Jessica was dead. As investigators began their work, the mood in the house was tense. Neighbors, curious about the commotion, started to gather outside, whispering and speculating about what had happened. News outlets soon picked up the story, but in those first few hours, the details were still unclear. Detectives examined the bedroom closely, taking note of the signs of a struggle. The belt that was likely used as the murder weapon was carefully bagged as evidence. Jessica's injuries indicated that she had been whipped to death, and the chaotic state of the room suggested she had bravely fought back against her attacker. By midday, the police had cordoned off the house, and the once quiet, prestigious neighborhood had become the center of a murder investigation. Police arrived at the scene within minutes of Dennis Collins's frantic 911 call. It was just after 9:30 a.m. on June 3, 2019, when Detective Marco Santino and his partner, Detective Lisa Ramsey, walked into the Collins Moore residence in far north Dallas. Both seasoned investigators with the Dallas Police Department, Santino and Ramsey had handled several high-profile cases in the past, but something about this one felt different. The home, located in one of the city's most affluent gated communities, was not the kind of place where grisly murders happened. The master bedroom was in chaos. A king-size bed sat unmade, with pillows and blankets scattered across the floor. The signs of a struggle were obvious. Drawers had been pulled open, lamps were knocked over, and the belt used to whip Jessica Collins Moore to death lay ominously beside her body. Jessica, naked and bruised, had suffered an incredibly violent death. The bruising around her body indicated that the belt had been used with force, and her fingernails showed signs that she had fought back, possibly scratching at her attacker. Santino instructed the forensics team to begin their examination. They dusted for fingerprints, bagged the belt as evidence, and took photos of the entire room. CSI technicians collected strands of hair, fibers from the bedding, and anything else that could help them piece together what had happened. The team also used luminol to check for traces of blood. Even though Jessica's injuries hadn't resulted in significant bleeding, they were thorough, careful not to miss any small detail. The detectives were particularly interested in the possibility of DNA evidence under Jessica's fingernails, hoping that might lead them to the killer. As the morning stretched into early afternoon, Santino and Ramsey discussed the case. The murder was brutal, and the use of the belt indicated that it was a crime of passion. Whoever had done this was fueled by intense emotion, which narrowed their focus to people close to Jessica. It was clear this investigation was just beginning, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. The first person the police focused on was Tanner Collins, Jessica's stepson. At just 20 years old, Tanner had recently returned home to Dallas after struggling at Iowa State University, where he'd been majoring in business. He had a difficult time adjusting to college life, especially managing his severe ADHD and excessive alcohol use. Tanner was known to be impulsive and had a rocky relationship with his father, Dennis Collins. After Dennis divorced Tanner's mother, leaving her penniless as she dealt with early-onset dementia, Tanner's resentment towards his father only grew. However, Tanner found solace in sex with Jessica, his much older stepmother. Tanner was tall and athletic, but his behavior was erratic. He was often moody and prone to emotional outbursts, which worried his friends and family. During his time at home, he had grown particularly close to Jessica. What began as a friendly bond had evolved into a secret sexual relationship. Tanner was infatuated with her, even obsessed. Jessica had become his only source of excitement in his life, and he saw her as an escape from his otherwise difficult home environment. When detectives brought Tanner in for questioning on June 4, 2019, they noticed that he was visibly shaken but tried to remain calm. Detective Santino and Ramsey knew they needed to tread carefully, as Tanner was emotionally volatile. They began by asking him about his relationship with Jessica. Tanner admitted they were close, but hesitated when asked if it had ever gone beyond that. He became defensive when pressed further, avoiding eye contact and giving short, clipped answers. Santino shifted the conversation toward the night of the murder. Tanner told police he had been out with friends playing Fortnite late into the night. He claimed to have no idea what had happened to Jessica. However, detectives noticed his story had some inconsistencies, especially regarding the timeline of when he had returned home. Tanner's responses became more agitated as the interrogation continued. At one point, he snapped, raising his voice and accusing the detectives of trying to pin the crime on him. He denied having anything to do with Jessica's death and asked if he could leave. Although he had been cooperative up to that point, his defensive attitude raised red flags for the investigators. The detectives knew they didn't have enough to hold him, but Tanner remained their top suspect. His emotional instability, history with Jessica, and proximity to the crime all kept him squarely in their sights as the investigation unfolded. The next person investigators turned their attention to was Dr. Dennis Collins, Jessica's husband. At 52 years old, Dennis was a well-known dentist in the Dallas area. His practice catered to wealthy clients, and he had built a solid reputation over the years. However, Dennis had been dealing with serious health issues. Diagnosed with prostate cancer just weeks after marrying Jessica, his treatment required frequent trips to Houston, leaving him often away from home. Despite his successful career and affluent lifestyle, Dennis' personal life had been falling apart. Dennis was a reserved man, traditional in many ways. He preferred control and structure in his life, which made his marriage to Jessica complicated. He had begun to sense that something wasn't right between them. The spark in their relationship had long faded, and while Dennis had suspected Jessica of having affairs, he had never confronted her directly. Instead, he threw himself into his work and focused on his cancer treatments, avoiding conflict whenever possible. When detectives questioned Dennis on June 5, 2019, just a day after Jessica's body was found, he was calm but noticeably detached. Sitting in the police station, he appeared tired, worn out from both his illness and the shock of his wife's brutal murder. Detective Santino asked Dennis where he had been the night of Jessica's death. Dennis explained that he had been in Houston for a routine checkup and stayed at a hotel overnight. He had only returned to Dallas early that morning. The police had verified Dennis' alibi and found that he had indeed been in Houston during the time of the murder. However, Dennis' distant demeanor made detectives wonder if he might have been involved in the crime in another way. Santino and Ramsey probed into the state of his marriage with Jessica. Dennis admitted that their relationship had grown cold, but he didn't seem angry or bitter about it. His tone remained flat, almost as if he had accepted the situation. When asked directly if he had any idea who might have wanted to harm Jessica, Dennis gave little information. He expressed disbelief that anyone could do something so violent to his wife, but offered no leads. The detectives left the interview feeling that while Dennis didn't seem capable of such a gruesome act, there was a lot he wasn't saying. With Dennis cleared of direct involvement, the investigation needed to move forward. But his vague answers and passive attitude kept him on their radar, even if only in the background. On June 7, 2019, just 2 days after Dennis Collins' interview, new evidence surfaced that gave the investigation a much-needed break. The weather in Dallas was hot and sunny, typical for early June, with temperatures reaching the mid-90s. Detectives Santino and Ramsey were called to Jessica's design office after her assistant, Emily Robertson, reported something suspicious. While cleaning out Jessica's desk, Emily discovered a hidden folder containing several incriminating documents. The folder, tucked away in a locked drawer, contained bank statements showing large, unexplained transfers from Jessica's interior design business to an account registered under the name of a woman the police hadn't yet heard of, Tanisha Marie Wright. The transfers totaled over $50,000, spread over the past year. Along with the financial records, the folder also held a burner phone with several text messages between Jessica and Tanisha, some of which hinted at a much closer relationship than the police had previously expected. This discovery raised immediate red flags. Jessica had been secretly embezzling money from her own company, and the recipient of those funds was Tanisha, her neighbor who worked as a personal trainer. Even more concerning was the tone of the texts between the two women. The messages were flirtatious and sometimes outright sexual, suggesting a romantic or physical connection that Jessica had kept hidden. There were also several references to drugs, with Jessica asking Tanisha to bring the bleeping angel dust, or requesting specific amounts of cash, further tying the two to illegal activity. With this new evidence in hand, Santino and Ramsey returned to the Collins home to search for any additional clues. They now believed that drugs could have played a major role in Jessica's life, and possibly her murder. In her walk-in closet, hidden behind some designer clothes, they found a small stash of drugs, mostly painkillers, and some cocaine, along with drug paraphernalia, including a scale and baggies. This discovery reinforced the idea that Jessica's secret life was much darker than anyone had initially realized. The new evidence pointed in several directions: financial crime, drugs, and hidden relationships. It also introduced Tanisha Marie Wright as a much more significant figure in Jessica's life, and possibly in her death. The detectives began to wonder if jealousy or money could have been the motive for the murder. Tanisha was now a prime suspect. Armed with this new information, the investigation took a sharp turn, with the focus shifting away from Dennis Collins and toward the mysterious connection between Jessica and Tanisha. Following the discovery of the hidden bank transfers and drug-related texts, Tanisha Marie Wright became the focus of the investigation. Tanisha, 26 years old, was a personal trainer who lived just down the street from the Collins home in their gated far north Dallas community. She was well known among the local elite for her fitness classes and had a number of wealthy clients. But behind her professional persona, Tanisha was involved in something much more dangerous: drug dealing. Tanisha and Jessica had met in 2016 at a local yoga studio. Their friendship quickly blossomed, leading them to spend a lot of time together. They would often be seen shopping at high-end or enjoying luxurious spa days. However, their friendship was not just about leisure. Tanisha was also Jessica's drug dealer. They would spend their afternoons together drinking, doing drugs, and playing video games, particularly Grand Theft Auto, which they enjoyed in Tanisha's upscale condo while Dennis Collins, Jessica's husband, was at work. This arrangement was known only to a few, hidden behind closed doors and carefully maintained secrets. The nature of their relationship became even more complicated with the discovery of Jessica's financial records. Large sums of money had been transferred from Jessica's interior design business to an account under Tanisha's name. This amount, over $50,000, was a substantial sum, raising questions about its purpose. Tanisha claimed that these payments were for personal training services and other favors, but the timing and amounts made this explanation dubious. Detectives Santino and Ramsey brought Tanisha in for questioning on June 8, 2019. She initially appeared calm and composed, addressing the detectives politely and answering their questions about her relationship with Jessica. She admitted to being close friends with Jessica but denied any involvement in her death. However, when confronted with the bank statements and sexually explicit text messages, her calm demeanor began to crack. The texts between Jessica and Tanisha were sexual and included references to drugs, suggesting a more intimate relationship than Tanisha admitted. The police focused on Tanisha's jealousy as a possible motive. Tanisha had developed strong sexual feelings for Jessica, which were not fully reciprocated. Her jealousy was further fueled by Jessica's close relationship with Tanner Collins, Jessica's stepson, who would join them on video game marathons and drug binges. Tanner and Jessica's sexual relationship, though secretive, was a source of tension. Tanisha's feelings of betrayal and resentment grew as she watched Jessica become more distant, particularly when Tanner would join them for video game sessions, and Jessica seemed to be more invested in her relationship with him. Tanisha's behavior during the interrogation grew increasingly erratic as the detectives pressed her on her whereabouts and activities. She became defensive and agitated, especially when discussing her interactions with Jessica. She maintained that she was at the Roundup Saloon, a popular Dallas nightclub, on the night of the murder, but her alibi was tenuous and uncorroborated. The detectives noted that Tanisha's growing frustration and erratic behavior made her a significant suspect. Her feelings for Jessica, combined with her resentment over Jessica's relationships and the financial transactions, pointed towards a potential motive. The investigation into Tanisha Wright's involvement was now a critical part of solving the case. Hey, true crime case solvers interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime case solvers. On June 10, 2019, after days of questioning suspects and piecing together evidence, the police finally honed in on their prime suspect, Tanner Collins. At 20 years old, Tanner had been living in his father's far north Dallas home after dropping out of Iowa State University due to academic struggles and severe ADHD. He had formed a close, secretive sexual relationship with his stepmother, Jessica Collins Moore. What had once seemed like a youthful affair had now spiraled into an intense obsession, fueled by Tanner's emotional instability. The police discovered that Tanner had grown increasingly jealous after finding out about Jessica's other lovers, including their female neighbor and drug dealer, Tanisha Wright, and possibly many others. He felt betrayed and abandoned by Jessica, who had begun distancing herself from him in the weeks before her death. This emotional turmoil, combined with his impulsive tendencies and reliance on drugs, made Tanner a volatile figure in Jessica's life. On the night of June 4, Tanner had confronted Jessica in her bedroom after they had sex. According to the police timeline, they had argued about her other relationships. Fueled by a toxic mix of jealousy, anger, and drugs, Tanner lashed out. In a fit of rage, he grabbed his father's heavy leather belt, which had been hanging in the closet. During the altercation, Tanner used the belt to whip Jessica, who was naked, multiple times. The brutal attack ended in her death as Tanner, unable to control his emotions, continued to beat her even after she was unresponsive. Tanner then fled the scene, leaving Jessica's lifeless body on the bedroom floor. He spent the next few hours attempting to cover his tracks, deleting incriminating text messages from his phone, and staging the crime scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. However, the inconsistencies in the evidence were too obvious, and the police quickly saw through the ruse. On the morning of June 11, 2019, police arrived at the Collins home to arrest Tanner. He didn't put up much resistance. In fact, when confronted by detectives, Tanner seemed resigned, almost as if he knew this moment was coming. He confessed to the murder during a lengthy interrogation, breaking down in tears as he described the chaotic confrontation with Jessica. His father, Dr. Dennis Collins, was reportedly devastated by the news, having never suspected his son was capable of such violence. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Tanner Collins had gone from a troubled college dropout to a cold-blooded killer in the eyes of the public. Jessica's family, though heartbroken, expressed relief that justice would finally be served. The trial of Tanner Collins began on September 3, 2019, at the George L. Allen Senior Courts building in Dallas, Texas. The courtroom was packed with journalists and local residents eager to see justice served. Tanner, 20 years old, faced charges of first-degree murder for the brutal killing of his stepmother, Jessica Collins Moore. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Sarah Burzoin DeAngelis, presented a strong case against Tanner. Burzoin DeAngelis, a 45-year-old lawyer known for her tough stance on crime, detailed the evidence linking Tanner to the murder. She argued that Tanner's obsessive behavior, combined with his emotional instability and jealousy over Jessica's relationships, provided a clear motive. Burzoin DeAngelis highlighted Tanner's confession, which he gave after a lengthy interrogation. She also discussed the incriminating text messages and financial records that connected Tanner to Jessica's death. On the defense side, Tanner's attorney, David Davidson, argued that Tanner was not in control of his actions due to his severe ADHD and emotional turmoil. Davidson, a 50-year-old lawyer with a reputation for defending clients with mental health issues, claimed that Tanner's mental state played a significant role in the crime. He suggested that Tanner was overwhelmed by his feelings and did not intend to commit murder. Davidson's arguments were based on psychological evaluations and expert testimony about Tanner's mental health. Jessica's family, including her husband Dennis and her close friends, were visibly emotional throughout the trial. They attended every day, hoping for justice for Jessica. Dennis, who had been ill with prostate cancer, struggled with the grief and the public nature of the trial. The impact of the trial on Jessica's family was profound, with many members expressing their pain and sorrow openly. On September 17, 2019, after a week of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. Tanner Collins was found guilty of first-degree murder. The jury's decision was met with a mix of relief and sadness. Tanner was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This sentence was seen as a reflection of the severity of his crime and the emotional devastation it caused. The verdict provided a measure of closure for Jessica's family, though it did not erase their grief. The trial and sentencing brought to light the tragic consequences of jealousy and emotional instability. The case remained a stark reminder of how hidden tensions and unresolved issues can lead to violence. After the trial, life in the wealthy gated community of far north Dallas began to settle back into its usual routine, but the effects of the murder case were deeply felt by everyone involved. Tanner Collins, now serving a life sentence without parole at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's Maximum Security Unit, had his life drastically altered. He faced a grim reality of prison life, far removed from the privileged world he once knew. Tanner's case was frequently reported in the media, with updates on his prison life and ongoing legal battles making headlines. Jessica Collins Moore's family struggled to adjust to life after the trial. Her husband, Dennis Collins, continued to battle his prostate cancer while coping with the loss of his wife and the turmoil caused by the trial. Dennis tried to maintain a low profile, avoiding public appearances and focusing on his health. He also took measures to safeguard his privacy, including moving to a more secure location to distance himself from the media attention that had surrounded the trial. Jessica's close friends, including Tanisha Marie Wright, who had initially been a suspect, were also affected. Tanisha faced severe backlash from the community and was left to rebuild her life. She lost many of her clients due to the scandal and had to make changes to her lifestyle. The case had caused a significant rift between her and the local community, affecting her reputation and personal relationships. Overall, the murder of